again. So, because today's topic is going to be leadership. So we will talk about leadership not only this time, but also the next and I guess the third time also, because it's such a huge part. So today we're going to hear only basic and historical leadership theories and base this everything on your demand to hear more about leadership requirements, leadership in HR, leadership styles, new leadership methods. So today you're going to hear only basic ideas about leadership. And the first I would like us to do is that you use a second device. And I would like you to ask in Mentimeter, what is effective management? So, okay. Okay. Do you see this now, the Mentimeter? I hear nothing. I see nothing.
No.
No, Dankeschön. Okay, again, now. Okay, here's the questionnaire. What is effective management? Type in www.menti.com and the number 413417. So the first guess is, what is effective management for you? Okay, so communication, coordination, productivity, people skills, teamwork, appreciation to set goals, again, motivation. Okay, yeah. Do you think there is an effective leadership which is not the same than the effective management? You can just talk. So is there a difference between managing people and leading people? Any idea?
I think it could be that a manager, like a team manager or a project manager, has to have an overview about everything, not only the team, not only the people, also about the business statistics, and I don't know. And the leader could be only responsible for the team, has to look that the team is the teamwork is good. The communication between the people is good, and so on. He doesn't look as much on the statistics for the project as the manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think
Good
one, sorry, I think
no, say it.
one example is, I think leadership, you work to get results, and management, effective management could be to see the results that leadership created.
Yeah, so it's a result. Huh? It's a good hint. Okay. Okay. Jetzt habe ich es. Ja, ich und Technik. Ne? Gleichermaßen. Okay. So. Okay. Okay. So when we think about managing people, here are competencies that managers need and require on a regular basis. This is a list that's in addition to your ideas. So you said, for example, communication is very important. Here you see, yes, conducting interviews, for example, is a competency they need, therefore communication. To set objectives, to set the same with setting goals. To give feedback, which is also part in or belongs to communication. To identify talent. You didn't hear listen to this. To conduct presentations, again, communication. Facilitate meetings, manage time. To solve problems, reporting to the top. To make decisions, solving conflicts, selling your ideas to your team, improve processes, create a positive climate, to understand politics, and, for example, to get rid of employees. Yeah, then something like to fire employees. When you analyze management ideas, there is one study that you hear all of the time. It's from Luthans, and Luthans actually looked at what are the most important adjectives or competencies that managers should have. And he listed a couple of managerial activities into 4 different sections, and then looked at what are ineffective managers and what are effective managers. So first of all, he said there is something like traditional management that might be very helpful to when it comes to managerial activities such as decision-making, planning, controlling. Secondly, as you said, communication, exchanging information and processing, for example, paperwork or digital paperwork. HR management, like you said, motivating to discipline, managing conflict and staffing and training. And last but not least, networking, like socializing, to do politics and interact with others. And then my question to you is, when you look at these 4 different sections, what do you think is a competency that is most helpful to be very efficient as a manager?
I think it's number 3.
HR, to motivate discipline, managing conflict. Any other guess?
I would have said 3-2 with a 2 as a close second.
Okay, so let's have a look. Luthans first of all said, okay, you have a typical average manager, and the average manager is doing all of it. Right? He's doing traditional management, communicate, HR, networking, while the traditional management is the majority of an average manager on a daily basis with traditional management. Secondly, he analyzed the successful manager, And a successful manager is doing, as you said, first HR management with almost 50% to motivate people and so on. So now, the really efficient manager, in contrast to the average and the successful manager, what do you think will be number one on this Kreis diagram, circle diagram? What's number one? It's not HR, unfortunately. No, I guess, okay. Then let me show it to you. The effective manager is the one that talks all of the time, who is communicating. Yeah, so 44% of the time of an effective manager, when you look at the allocation of activities during a day, is 44% communication. And number two is HR, human resource management. Then it's networking. And the last one is 19% of daily activities are done with traditional management.
So generally we guessed right, because in Menti communication was our biggest thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So you said communication is number one, and then that's what you see here. So that's to be an effective manager. Okay. So now managing is, as you said, something different than leading. Here you see the deceased boss of Apple. And when it comes to leadership theories, I mean, there are millions of theories of it, and you're going to hear today two basic approaches when it comes to leadership. But first of all, to do a differentiation, in general, we talk about leadership when there is an ability of a person to influence a group toward the achievement of goals. That's what you said also is something important for a manager. And in contrast to this, the management is to use the own authority as, for example, being in a leadership position, which is inherent to the designated former rank to obtain compliance from organizational members. So you have two versions here now. You have a manager who has the title, and you have a leader who has the ability. So leadership and management is something different. And we know from theory that we have lots of different approaches. And one of the most basic ones you heard already in one of the first lectures, that was the McGregor idea of the X and Y theory. Anything you remember from the X and Y theory from McGregor? I think lecture 1 on motivation or history, one of these lectures.
I think the X persons were the persons with lots of intrinsic motivation, and the others with extrinsic, and the X persons work for their own, and the Y, no, I don't know anymore.
Who wants to help her? The cool thing is you can Google next to the lecture. X and Y theory.
I can say that the main difference is the way that the managers see the workers, that it's available, and the X theory, the managers see the working as just avoiding some responsibilities and how they cannot like their work. And in the theory, why managers see the works as like enjoying the environment and enjoying the company and the daily, and just accepting more responsibility in your hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this theory came from the 50s, and today we will start in the 80s with two basic approaches to this. So when we see a difference between management and leadership, both of it is necessary in order to work efficiently. So you could be, for example, a strong leader and a strong manager, but you don't have to be. You could also be a strong leader, but not a good manager at all. So managing, as a summary, something like planning, budgeting, organizing, controlling, versus the leadership to establish, for example, a vision and directions, to inspire and align people, and yeah, to give them values. Do you have an example of a person who is a strong leader but not a good manager? Person who gives direction and visions, but is not very good in planning and organizing, controlling.
Maybe an example could be Greta Thunberg, for example, because she has a vision or a direction where she wants to be, but I don't think she's such a manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good example. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Das machen wir noch nicht. Hold on. Okay. So, the two basic approaches I would like you to show today are derived from traditional research in leadership, and all of them are or came from the United States in the 80s. I guess there might be research in Asia as well, but I must admit, I only know American studies when it comes to traditional leadership. The more modern ones that Mrs. Tierhood, for example, worked on in the leadership class, like digital leadership or servant leadership, they might be a global phenomenon, but the original studies are from the 80s in the United States. So in the first one, you will not believe it, is one approach that is actually called the trait approach. So trait theories of leadership. You know that I'm a personality psychologist, so you heard quite a lot, so especially the HR majors when it comes to trait, but here's also a very important section in history when it comes to leadership idea that traits are important. So in this approach, these theories consider that personality, social, physical, or intellectual traits differentiate leaders from non-leaders. So the basic idea here is that in the trait theories, the basic assumption is that there is a long-term characteristic of a leader impact on his or her leadership success, which is independent from an actual situation. Which means, what do you remember when it comes to personality factors? Are they stable or are they unstable? Stable means, do they change over time or do they not change over time? What do you remember?
Well, some can change, but mostly they are constant.
Yeah, actually we say they are very stable. When it comes to personality factors, we even say they cannot change at all, only with a minor intensity, but usually you stay from your birth on with a specific personality trait. So conventionally, we think about traits as something like intelligence, dominance, status, and gender. But you as specialists now, when it comes to personality factors, you know a little bit more. Yeah? So traits that people would say also something like self-confidence, ambition, resilience, humor, experience, and so on. But what do you know? What are really traits? And now, again, it's a study from the 80s that I would like to present. Oh, next time I give you numbers and then I just ask the number. Let's see, here he is. The test, or here it is. The test that's used as a majority since the 70s. It's the NEO-FFI in German and the NEO-PI in English. And here is the original pattern. And let's have a look at this typical personality test. And these are the original items. You don't have to fill it out. You know what kind of personality trait you have. For example, can you read this, or is this too small on your laptops or screens? You cannot read it. So I just, in that case, say it a little bit loudly. So we have in personality tests very famous ones. This is the most famous one, although it is almost never used in real life and in HR departments, but the theory behind it, they are used in almost all HR personality tests, and all of them are based on the NEO-FFI. So 60 items or question altogether, and these 60 items analyze 5 different dimensions. So the typical question is, I'm not a warrior. I like to have a lot of people around me. I enjoy concentrating on fantasy, daydream, and so on. So here's the that you could fill it out. So in the end, out of this, we know there are 5 different personality dimensions, and these are used in this trait approach to leadership to say there are specific traits that tell us that you are a good leader over time. So the big 5, for the ones who do not, is someone here who does not know the big 5? Then raise your hand. There is this button that you can raise your hand. Ganz sicher, alle wissen's. Gut. Okay, so for the big 5, and well, okay, just sample items. I'll switch. Just go to this. The idea is that in this trait approach, the basic idea is there are certain characters that foster and help to be a good leader. Certain limitations we all agree on. Yeah, the studies are 70s, 80s, and we know that there are overall no universal traits that predict real leadership in each situation. And again, the trait idea means in every situation you act the same because you have a specific trait. On the other hand, we also know that there is a unclear evidence of cause and effect of the relationship of specific leaderships and traits. And a better predictor of real leadership, we also know it seems to be to distinguish between effective and ineffective leaders by other functions. And other functions are millions of other leadership theories as well. So in addition to the trait theory, with the assumption here as the traits from the big five, extraversion, conscientiousness, openness, we know that the idea is that leaders are born, and the idea is to select leaders as a goal, but we do not know that traits generalize across situations and seems to be to predict leader emergence better than leader effectiveness. So that's the basic idea of a trait approach. Any questions to this so far? And what do you think about this approach? What would be very easy if we believe this approach?
It would be easier if we know what type of the personality of your workers and to control them and how to work with them the right way.
Okay, in that case, in addition, you have to analyze the employees and not only the leaders. Yeah, so you say that you have to show a different personality as a leader, depending on the personality of your employees. Well, could be an advancement of this theory.
This theory leads someone to put people into compartments, and then you only give those in the right compartment a chance. Mm-hmm. And the others are in your head already crossed out and not suitable. Mm-hmm. It might not be right.
Mm-hmm. So if we from the HR departments would think leaders are born, what would we do?
Maybe I think we cannot develop leaders, we can only hire them, and if they aren't a leader, they aren't a leader. We cannot do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would be obsolete, especially as the HR development department. Yeah, but that's how they started the first ideas in leading. Yeah, there are certain leaders that are born. Think about the aristocratic genes. Yeah, leaders are born. That was the basic idea, that there is a specific personality that is suitable to lead societies. Okay, so the second approach is not the trait theory approach, but the second approach is completely different. In this approach, also from the 80s, and the most important studies were done in Ohio and Michigan. And maybe you have heard about this, the Ohio State and the Michigan State studies. And they are called the behavioral theories. So they say that not traits, but specific behaviors differentiate leaders from non-leaders. Now, on the one hand, the trait theory that leaders are born and not made. But in the behavioral theory idea, they say that leadership behaviors can be taught. So what did they do? They analyzed also in interviews and observing people in 2 different studies, and I think they were only 1.5 years apart from each other, also in the 80s. What they did is in Ohio and in Michigan, they try to find out what specific behavior helps people and leaders to be effective. And their goal was not that leaders are born, but they say leaders can be completely developed, yeah, and can be trained. And they say there are two dimensions that seem to be effective for leaders when it comes to the behavioral approach. The one is an initiating structure towards people, people orientation, and a production orientation. These derive from the Ohio State University studies. In Michigan, they said, okay, there is a consideration for work and there is an employee orientation. And in many studies, both of them are always mentioned together because both of them have the same dimension development. On the one hand, there is an orientation towards the people. And on the other hand, there is a dimension and orientation toward the production. And there is a specific leadership that's in between. So what they say is leaders can be trained. Their problem sure is effective behaviors do not generalize across different situations. But this is what they say. So in Ohio, they found the dimensions. And what do you know about a dimension? What's the definition of a dimension? We have the same with personality traits. They are also, by definition, a dimension. Oh, you had controlling this morning. That's why. Okay, dimension means there is, for example, for personality traits, the dimension of extraversion and introversion. So you can be on one side of the dimension between to be very introverted towards very extroverted. So this is what they say here. They say on the one hand to initiate structure and the defining and structure of roles from 0 to 10, and the consideration, the job relationship that reflect trust and respect. So these are two dimensions from the Ohio State and the University of Michigan. They also found out two dimensions, which they said are key dimensions, and also the employee oriented to emphasize interpersonal relationship, and which is the most powerful dimension in their idea, and the production orientation to emphasize technical aspects. So the dimensions of the two studies are very similar. That's why they used almost always together as Ohio and Michigan, but in the end, there were two separate studies. So the idea is that there is research on the nature of leadership styles and their impact on leadership effectiveness. So the two dimensions for Ohio as consideration is, for example, the leader is friendly and approachable as someone who shows trust, friendship, support, respect, and warmth. So an employee orientation. And the initiating structure is, for example, the leader lets group members know what's expected of them. That's more towards the production orientation. So when you look at consideration and initiating structure from the Ohio State studies, we see four different, in this case, fields. Yeah, when there is a very high consideration and a low initiating structure, we know that there is less emphasis on structuring the tasks of people, while leaders concentrate on satisfying employee needs and wants. What is happening if you say that there is, for example, low initiating and low consideration? What kind of leadership style would you show? Low consideration, low initiating.
I guess one would be a very bad leader, and it would be basically pure chaos, because there would be no structure, there would be no real communication with the employees, because one wouldn't consider them and one wouldn't consider the circumstances of whatever project one is working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you have high initiating structure but low consideration towards the people?
Well, I guess one could be a good leader. One could just always ask someone like an assistant that is considerate, and then one could use that advice for his structure and his leading.
Okay. Let's have a look. So first of all, low consideration and low initiating. In that case, as you said, yeah, it seems to be not very efficient. In this case, the leader fails to provide necessary structure and demonstrates little consideration for employee needs and wants. And for someone with a very high initiating structure and consideration, there's an emphasis which is placed on structuring employee tasks, while the leader demonstrates little consideration for employee needs and wants. And think about the X and Y theory. We see here again McGregor's idea of whom, X or Y. Laura, you knew it.
I'm thinking, can you do the question again?
Yes, hold on. So X and Y, where do you see the theory of McGregor, in which two parts?
I think theory X is low consideration and low initiating structure, or high but low consideration. And theory U is high consideration, low or high initiating structure. I'm not sure.
So primary emphasis is placed on structuring employee tasks, while the leader demonstrates little consideration for employee needs and wants. That's in McGregor the X or Y.
Y.
Yes, exactly. And less emphasis is placed on structuring employee tasks, while the leader concentrates on satisfying employee needs and wants. And that's, in that case, is X for McGregor. Huh? They all copy from each other. And now the next copy of a leadership idea is, maybe you've heard this in one of your first semesters. That's now that this behavioral theory in Ohio and Michigan are used in a very famous grid model. And this grid model is derived by Blake and Mouton. And they say, okay, there are 4 different leaderships or 4 leadership styles that are found when you think about the behavioral theories. in Ohio and Michigan, and when you cross the concern for production and concern for people. So they say that research shows that there is not one best style of leadership. Yeah, you are not born with it as a trait, but they say the effectiveness of a particular leadership style depends on the situation at hand. So let's have a look at their idea. So the managerial grid, you even see there's a copyright on it. You have the concern for people and you have the concern for production. Again, yeah, based on Ohio and Michigan studies, and you see grids in between. So they say, to use the studies on leadership behavior, we use the concern for people and the concern for production, which are based on the employee orientation and production orientation. And there's a specific leadership style that you all know, I bet, if I would ask you, by a certain area in this grid model. So we have what they say, 81 different leadership styles, depending on the concern for people and the concern for production. But in the end, they say we have 4 leadership styles as an arrangement. So there's something in the middle with a 5.5 degree, which means there is a middle of the road management, something in between. But they developed 4 official leadership styles. One is the team management. The other one is the authority compliance. Then there is the impoverished management and the country club management. So let's have a look at what that means. So the authoritarian leader, out of the managerial grid idea from Blake and Mouton, they say that people who get this rating are very much task-oriented and are hard on the workers, so they are very autocratic. And you all know this term, yeah, authoritarian leadership, you know this, and it's based on Blake and Mouton. So there is little or no allowance for cooperation or collaboration. And people who are very task-oriented, they show, for example, these are the explanations from the original questionnaire. That's why they look so strange, but I just copied it from the original questionnaire, which you will see later. So they are very strong on schedules. They expect people to do what they're told without question or debate. When something goes wrong, they tend to focus on what's blamed rather than concentrate on exactly what's wrong and how to prevent it. They are intolerant in what they see as a dissent, maybe just by someone's creativity, so it's difficult for the subordinates to contribute or to develop. Go back. So people, for example, with a grid number of 9.1, in this idea of Blake and Mouton, they show this authoritarian behavior. So they are very high in production, very low on the concern for people. And again, that's the Y theory of McGregor. Yeah, he didn't call it authoritarian, but what it's behind. So authoritarian leadership. The second is the team leader. So the team leader is high task and high relationship oriented. That's, I think, the 9.9. So this type of person leads by positive example and endeavors to foster a team environment in which all team members can reach their highest potential, both as team members and as people. And they encourage teams to reach team goals as effectively as possible, while also working tirelessly to strengthen the bond among the various members. So they normally form and lead some of the most productive teams. Again, go back. So these are the 9.9 and in this area. So if you have ratings in this area, you belong to the leadership style of Blake and Mouton for team orientation. Okay, then the country club leader. They are low on task, but very high on relationship. So they use predominantly reward power to maintain discipline and to encourage teams to accomplish their goals. So they're almost incapable of employing the more punitive, cursive, and legitimate powers. And they inability result from fear that using such power could jeopardize relationship with the other team members. Again, let's have a look. No. Oh, too bad. Okay, let's have a look here. So the country club, for example, with a rating of a 1 and a 9. And then we have the impoverished as the last of the 4 leadership styles. And they use delegation and disappear management style. They are low in task and low in relationship. Yeah, they are just not here. And you said already that's not very efficient. So they are committed to either task accomplishment or maintenance. They essentially allow their team to do whatever it wishes and prefer to detach themselves from the team process by allowing the team to suffer from a series of power struggles. Okay, so we all think that we are team leaders. That's what I guess. But now we're going to test this. I uploaded the original managerial grid test, and I would like you to fill it out. And in the end, you get an individual number, and you know towards what kind of leader you belong. And then let's have a look at the end, what you find out about yourself. So in that case, I would like you to open in Elias. I uploaded in our advanced, can you see this? Can you see the Elias? Ah. Normal. Now you should see it, yeah. Okay, so I uploaded in our advanced HR tests. In tests, the section or the folder leadership, and you found the Blake and Mouton original managerial grid questionnaire. And I would like you to fill this out now. So here are the original items, only 18. And you have to sign if this statement is about your own leadership behavior. So I'm going to stop the video now, because we don't need. So again, okay, here's the result, just for the video, the result of your rating. 80% of you say that they are team leaders, 20% that they are impoverished leaders. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, now can you see this now? 9. Das habe ich auch noch nicht verstanden. So, in that case, I would like you now to break up into 2 groups. And I have a counterpoint exercise. We never did this here in class. So this means there will be 2 groups only, and one group will have the counterpoint leaders are born. And the second group will have the counterpoint leaders are made. And I give you a text. I uploaded it already in the exercises. And group number 1 should work out arguments why you think that leaders are born is correctly, and to convince the other group why leaders are not made in the other way around. Yeah. So to see this now. Oops. Ah, das ist ja wirklich echt profimäßig. Hold on. Jetzt habe ich es. Okay. Good. In our advanced HR class, we find exercises. And in exercises, here's the exercise number 3, exercise counterpoint trait or behavior. you have a text on one hand that says, okay, leaders are born, not made. On the one hand, point, and the other one is the counterpoint. So group number 1 is for point, and group number 2 is for counterpoint, and find arguments to convince the other group why their theory, the trait theory or the behavioral theory, is correct. Okay. So, okay.